The crew defeated their serpent-folk obstacle. However, the finer details in Talford's notes become threadbare in the latter portions of this recounting. He admits near defeat and the near loss of his own life. If I were to be sympathetic and assume I've the insightfulness to have a read on his thoughts and feelings throughout these accounts that he's left with me, I would presume he felt a terrible frustration in his near death, perhaps even an embarrassment. At the very least, it is obvious he does not wish to reflect upon it, let alone dwell. Another glimpse of something human within him, perhaps, at odds with his apathetic nature again. Suffice it to say, victory was theirs without any major losses, though I wish that sentiment stood for the remainder of these events. Upon ascension of the lighthouse and returning to the cathedral, a significant end to the battle of the secret agents was shown. A near standstill, toe-to-toe conflict that ended in victory for the Delaris, with a well-timed blow that slowly turned his Harovek's opponent to stone. The details from Talford returned in full quite quickly here. It is beyond obvious how powerful magic tugs his attention back. From here, the process repeats, and the crew finds more details on yet another lens, crimson in color, and the result is the appearance of a black and roiling portal, the missing representation of the insubstantial ebon, finally stood before the crew, and they bravely stepped through. Edward witnessed to a scene of a woman and a drow, violently putting a librarian to use in restoring the Harovek's agent back to flesh. His wounds were still mortal, but by replacing his armor with another magical set, the woman promised his loyalty would be rewarded, and continued service was at hand. The magic that follows is nigh impossible for most minds. I tremble at the idea of trying to understand it myself. The crew was transported to a beach, of all places, and made to witness a conversation, which Talford suspected harkened back to the voices Aelin heard within the halls of his coastal lodge. The woman's identity is clear now, as she and the drow discuss the eventual creation of the megastructure below the gauntlet. It is, of course, Belcora Harovex herself, and her Abomination vaults. The two vanished, but the crew remained on the beach for a short time, where a final piece of paper, and of the puzzle, flit its way across the sands, and came into Talford's hands. This is where the hounds came again, surrounding the crew in a wide circle, snarling and snapping, as their surroundings shifted from sea and land to an arcane library, where each hound stood at the corner of a bookcase. And the sounds of heavy footfalls were the next warning of doom, as an imposing creature clad in plate armor approached the crew with obvious malice. My mind reels, stomach churns, and heart stops at this moment, as Talford's notes tell little about what came of the rest of the crew. Because he fled. He fled as fast as he could muster. He even did what he could to block the way behind him. He left them all behind. Took everything they found. He wholly and completely admits it. And I don't know why. Because now I am in possession of what he took for himself, given to me freely by his own wretched, shaking hands. He took time on the road to write these accounts, but arrived at my door's ringing bell, strung out and haggard. What happened on the road here is not among what he left me, but it seems to me now that he deserves more than what haunts him. I will continue my study of what else remains. I'm not sure if what's left is worth recording, but if something significant comes to light, I'll consider posterity. For now, I need to step away from what feels like trying to justify a monster. Perhaps I'll find hope in seeking out what happened to the others. Those who sought to do better for others than themselves. Hey everyone, Freeman here, your beloved GM. Can I say that about myself? I hope you all enjoyed episode 100 and the 10-part series that it turned out to be. A lot of work went into it, and I'm sure you have lots of questions even now that it's finished. You know, the recaps of Troubles in Otari, or as we call it in-house, Local Legends, was a very nostalgic ride for us to recount, and the vignettes co-created with myself and all of the cast to help you get a better feel for their characters' personalities were a lot of fun to create. And as I said before, episode 100 and the story that it was meant to tell is very much a part of the greater narrative of Stemming the Tide. So the train does not stop here. In fact, I imagine you have lots of questions as to what the point of it all even was. And where the hell is it all going? Well, I hope to have those questions answered in time as we continue back into the main story with the primary characters. But before that, I figured I'd give you a little more to get your brains around. This epilogue will surely have you asking even more questions, but should also give you a little more to hang on to as we navigate the impact of episode 100's events. The following scenes are interspersed moments that take place immediately after Talford escaped the Foray Logos, but also more or less before he arrived in Otari. I hope you enjoy them and perhaps even seek out some of the subtlest interconnecting nods that I've written so far. I'm always adding little tiny things into these scenes. And if you are listening to this on the private Patreon feed, be sure to stick around at the very end because it will continue on for another behind-the-scenes chat, this time with the entire cast about their experiences throughout all of episode 100. Thanks for listening, and enjoy. The dull sound of chaos floats in the back of Aylin's mind. Everything is muted, slowing down. Perception. Breath, heart rate, consciousness, quickly fading to a slow stop. The persistent sounds pushing through in these final moments are the hisses and snarls of otherworldly hounds, the low thud of galloping hooves, the distressed bleating of a loyal companion, and the shallow, unconscious whimpers of a dying friend. And as the hooves fade into the distance, and the snarls seem to back away, and the bleating is soothed, it all comes to a stop. And somewhere in Aylin's mind, he knew. This must be the end. The physical pain felt buried in the numbness created by all these heartbreaking sounds. It was no longer something to cling to. And so he stopped pretending and just let go. That is, until he couldn't. As the pain seared its way back across his body, and he gasped his way into reality again. His eyes opened in a flash to see the bloodless wounds across his arms start painfully closing up. The sensation across his face and hands and feet felt like the sting of stepping into a warm room on a cold winter's day, as spittle dripped from his slack-jawed chin. No, not spittle. Something else. It was startling, and it was exhausting. Small, confusing moments in quick succession both woke him from his slowing stupor and dragged him back down to the darkness of fatigue. He turned to his friend with a desperate hand and knocked over an empty bottle. It rolled around the floor to where his friend should be and stopped at a pair of standing leather boots. His eyes followed them up to the arms of a silhouette. It stood there cradling a limp and lifeless Arthur, and turned to face Aylin. Its face was avian sharp, and seemed shrouded in shadow, as Aylin's mind slipped away once again into a dreamless slumber. After a long pause and a close listen, on a loud and uncaring street, a blind, begging kitsune woman resumes her shaking of coins in a cup and calling for handouts from the passers-by. She sits cross-legged with an unbalanced lean to one side. She bears the marks of many injuries, both old and new. An old patch covers one eye, while the other is scarred sightless. A clipped ear here and skin patch where fur should be there. Despite it all, she seems comfortable with her lot, if not resigned. After a closely calculated amount of time, the rattle of coins takes on a certain and distinct rhythm, which is answered down the road with a responding rhythm of wooden chimes, and another via the clatter of pots and pans, then the jingle of tiny bells. The signal continues down the line, hidden in plain view, and by the time it's made its way back toward the kitsune, she is already hefting herself up with a crutch under one arm, her left pant tied up to the end of an amputated leg. She slowly and awkwardly makes her way to a narrow alley and turns in, a hand on the wall guiding your path. Once comfortably away from the busy street, she changes the eye patch over to the scarred eye and gingerly blinks the other as it adjusts to the light. A half-orc woman steps into the alley at the other end and briskly marches towards her and hands her an intricate prosthetic. They give each other a curt nod, and the kitsune quickly fits it to her leg before speaking low. "Find me the sparrow. I have a job for her." The sound of water begins to slowly rouse Aelin from a deep, deep sleep. There is a distant but pervasive ache in his whole body. The sort of ache that comes from pushing oneself to the brink. The sort of ache that only time can mend. He opens his eyes. He's in a rustic, simple room, comfortable and familiar. He turns to see a young woman holding a small wash bowl, gently washing the face of an aging Shuni laying in the next bed over. An anxious pit opens deep and wide within his stomach, and he stirs and tries to speak. His throat is bone dry, and manages only a croak of what he hopes were the words, "Is he okay?" This startles the young woman for a moment, but she quickly recovers and sets the bowl and sponge aside. Lifting a pitcher and a cup from a nearby table, she pours some water and brings it to Aelin, gently tipping the edge to his lips. He sips eagerly, but she's careful not to let him take too much at once. She turns her head back to Arthur's direction. "He's touch and go. He's tough for all the years he's collected. But I'm afraid that's exactly what's working against him now. I can't say for sure if he'll pull through. The other, the one that wasn't with you, he didn't make it." There's a light tap, tap, tap on the window next to them. The young woman stands to look out and down into the yard below and spies a youngster running away. She scans the yard and spots a figure standing near an alley, staring into the window at her, and she nods to herself. Turning to Aelin, she offers him another sip of the water before setting the cup down on the side table nearest him. "I have to go, but my mother will be up to check on you shortly. I hope your friend pulls through." Aelin tries again to croak out another word, but he can't tell if it's clear enough or if the young woman just knows exactly what to say. "I don't know. You just showed up on the doorstep near death's door. I don't know what did all that to you, but it's good to see you both again anyhow. I'll be back when I can." She pulls a piece of folded paper from her pocket and places it on the table near the door. She pauses for the briefest of moments before stepping through the threshold. Down the stairs and out the back door into the yard, she quickly and casually tends to a large goat lounging by a trough. Giving him a pat on the head and adding more hay to the feeder, it offers a thankful bleat as she turns to spot the figure by the alley again,
who immediately ducks in at the sight of her. She follows. A short path she's walked many times. She is led to a small overgrown garden that surrounds an old pear tree. The figure stands next to another, seated on a bench, waiting for her approach. And as she does, she stops for a moment to read an inscription upon the old tree. May this tree mark the return of those unjustly spurned. Just above the words are two connecting curved lines that form the simplest silhouette of a bird in flight. She pauses to longingly look at the cobblestones beneath her feet, and then she steps forward. And back in the room, Aylin's muddled mind continues to try and sift through the circumstances that got him here. His brow is scrunched in confusion. What did she say? Good to see us again? She did look familiar. But weariness and ache slowly steal his presence of mind again, as he slips into another deep sleep. This time, it's filled with nightmares. The brutality left behind at each stop so far is nothing compared to this. The sign of this roadside inn dangles from only one of its two hooks, adorned with an image of a wood-handled tool with a perpendicular metal point slightly hooked down toward the handle at the end. A woman in leather garb and a dark hooded cloak carefully steps over the dead body of a presumed local, possibly passing traveler. Regardless of which, their unnaturally twisted legs give away their attempt to run from something within the building. Must have been in for a drink. The bloodless wounds that pockmark the skin point toward what was worth running from. Like a felling axe had struck them all over, but impossibly missing every blood vessel. The woman steps up to the stairs leading in with a confident bearing and cocks her head to the side to read the sign. The Plucky Picaroon. A clever name for a tiny stop along the lumber line. She'd give herself a chuckle if she weren't so horrified by what transpired here. The previous stops were roadside inns too, but also farmsteads and country homes, each with its own tale to tell. But all of them mention a half-elf man with white hair, haggard from the road, almost always rudely blowing smoke at the children or the dog or someone's mother. And then various interpretations of flameless black smoke in corners of halls or the edges of buildings. The sudden appearance of dark animals getting the farm dog all riled up, startling the livestock, or biting someone before giving vanishing chase to the now fleeing man. Each story says he looked very tired, then exhausted, then as if he hadn't slept in days, with a growing look of mania and fear. The woman deduces he has little left to defend himself. Most people were fine, or at least would recover, until now. Here, there was a full-on battle. The victims, plenty, and the survival rate seems to be nil. The smell wafting from the building is a mix of early decay, spilled beer, and smoke from the smoldering fireplace. Though there is a noticeable lack of blood amid the potpourri of destruction. She hopes to herself that this is the peak of it, and that this growing trail of chaos doesn't snowball its way into Otari itself. That town doesn't need any more trouble than it already has. She spends less time here than the previous stops. She's seen enough. She turns back toward the door and the sunbeams shine across the yet-to-settle dust. No use wasting time over no blood. She steps out, and the light bounces off her silver-beaked mask. The friendly chime over a shopkeep door is followed by the shaky footsteps of a shaken man. The shopkeep lifts his eyes from the book he's reading and raises his brow in half-surprise. "You're looking a little worse for wear. Not so bad as the last time, though." He places his book down behind the counter with a guarded posture.
I need you to hold on to something.
Again? You still owe me your story from what happened the first time.
Well, now you'll get two.
The man gently steps forward and drops a small pile of papers on the desk before turning on an unsteady heel to exit the shop. Pausing for only a moment to look at a book within arm's reach, he peers over his shoulder at the shopkeep, who is now fussing over the papers now that he's noticed they were audaciously torn from a book. The man looks back to the book next to him, and the urge to take it for himself runs through him. But anxiety lurches over him as he spies the sharp angles of the cover's corners. He hurries through the overbearing square threshold and strides his way down the middle of the road. The same friendly chime from the same inviting door precedes the entering of a woman in a hooded cloak, her eyes and head cast downward as she steps in with a suspicious stride. The shopkeep places a bookmark between his pages and stands up with a grave look. She reaches to her hood with a dramatic sweeping motion and pulls it back with a flash of silver. The hood sits heavy on her nape, as if weighed down, and she turns to the shopkeep with a pleasant smile. The shopkeep closes his book in one hand and returns her his own.
You gave me a small fright there, my dear.
Apologies, sir. I didn't mean to startle.
No, it's quite all right. When you read as much as I do, your imagination tends to get away from you. Now, what can I help you with, young lady?
I'm looking for someone. I think they may have come by here a short while ago.
Oh. I get lots of people stopping in, Ms.
Starborn. The shopkeep gives her a questioning look, but is only answered with her stoic silence.
Very well, Miss Starborn. Anything you can tell me about who you're looking for?
He's Iovaran, like myself. Loves a good read. Bit of a loner, except lately. Probably looked pretty gaunt and tired, too.
Yes. Well, you might be in double luck, or twice unlucky, depending on how you look at it.
How do you mean?
I know two such people who meet that description.